Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. January, is it a make or break month for the Lakers? We'll explain next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everyone for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one is always free. It is never behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where over 22,000 subscribers are hanging out, talking to each other, talking to us. And Andy, they are ticked off about the state of the Lakers as they enter 2024. A lot that we're going to get into in today's show. The Lakers we've a rare couple days off to really look at the team. So today, tomorrow, ahead of the Miami game, we'll be kind of digging into what's wrong and what might be fixed. Talk about Darvin Ham, whether or not he's overthinking these rotations, the absence of Gabe Vincent and why that is such a major pain in the rear for Darvin. First, want to let people know that today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Andy, hope you've had a good new year so far. We're not that far into it. But the Lakers need
to turn fine.
Going okay.
Yeah.
The Lakers need to turn things around 2023.
18 hours into 2024 doesn't feel a lot different, but we'll see. By the time people hear this, it'll be like 24 hours in, and who knows what'll happen next.
Yeah. So we've got a whole world of possibilities. Mm-hmm. Lakers obviously finished 2023 on a sour note. It was an ugly finish. Guys clearly are frustrated, whether with the just results, whether with Darvin, whether with a combination of those two things.
With each other.
With each other, no question. Anthony Davis was showing some obvious frustration in that New Orleans game about the defensive help he was getting, or lack thereof, from his teammates. So I think there is some of that.
Combined with all the defensive help that he is providing. I think it's the combination of both. It's like, look, guys, I can't do everything. Like, I know people talk about me doing everything defensively, but I cannot literally do
it's
everything.
It's meant to be a figure of speech.
Right. And, one of the things I know we're going to talk about over the course of this show with some of Darvin's decisions over the month of December that have increasingly upset a lot of fans, increasingly led us to question some of those decisions. The fact remains, during this 11-game slide since the IST final, where they are 3-8, you can dissect some of these decisions, break down if he's landing on the or not the correct ways to go about trying to get them back on track, discover whatever identity, but they have been way worse defensively during this period. For all of the issues we've covered with the offense is actually, over these 11 games, better than the season average. So, it's really the defense that has been killing this team over the last 11 games. And I can understand why AD has reached a point where he's like, folks, seriously, a little help? Please?
Yeah, I mean, look, when LeBron, there are times when LeBron, for example, will point or glare. I mean, we got used to this with Kobe, where Kobe would give the point to somebody later in his career when it's like, okay, dude, you're not totally doing everything you're supposed to be doing either. And you can roll your eyes at that as a teammate. When Anthony Davis gives you the point or the glare or the frustrated face, you just got to eat it because that guy, he is doing everything for you on your behalf. One of the things, Andy, that that Darvin and the Lakers as a group have talked about are some of the mitigating circumstances that have led to a 17-17 record that is not where anybody wants to be. And the line between excuse and explanation can be very fuzzy But there are certain things that certainly impact. The Lakers have had injuries that have made it difficult to set a lineup. They have had a difficult schedule with more games, just literally more games than other teams have played. They have led the league. They are tied for the league lead in back-to-backs. They have played 7 back-to-backs. And they have played an incredibly road-heavy schedule with a ton of travel and crisscrossing the country and all that kind of stuff. This month, I can't tell you the injuries are going to improve. I can't tell you. I haven't looked exactly to see how many back-to-backs they have.
I
But
have the
one thing
schedule in front of me.
Yeah, I have it pulled up in front. I just didn't count back-to-backs. One thing I can tell you,
I
though,
have it
Andy,
counted.
oh, good. Thank you.
I have that information.
The one thing that they will not be able to complain about in January, and that makes January a make or break month, is the crisscrossing the country away game thing. That stops. They spend all but one game in Los Angeles in January. The schedule in that sense opens up in a big way.
Yeah, it's not quite all but one game in Los Angeles in January, but it is.
I'm sorry. There's they travel to Utah, and then at the end of the month, it's to San Francisco.
Right.
They start a trip at the end of the month. I should.
Yeah, the overwhelming majority of the month is in LA. This is how it breaks down. We mentioned on the 3rd, they play Miami. Then on the 5th, these are all, by the way, hosted games unless indicated otherwise. 3rd, they play Miami. Then on January 5th, Memphis. January 7th, the Clippers. January 9th, the Raptors. January 11th, the Phoenix Suns. On the 13th, they go to Utah. On the 15th, they're back at home hosting the Thunder. The 17th, the Mavericks. 19th, the Nets. 21st, the Blazers. 23rd, they are at the Clippers, but that is basically a home game. Certainly you don't have to leave town for it. Then the 25th, hosting Chicago. Then the 27th, they go on the road to the Warriors. That's the second time this month they leave LA. And then on the 29th, they go to Houston to take on the Rockets. Only the second time they leave California in January. And then on the 30th, they go to Atlanta to play the Hawks. It is the first and only back-to-back of the month. And the first time also that they break the every other day pattern of January for them. They play from the moment the first game in Miami, they play until the last game every other day. That's the way it lays out.
Right. And so they are home until the long road trip that bleeds into the beginning of February and all that. It's a 6-game road trip, the longest remaining trip they have for the rest of the season. Actually, it's tied for that. I think they had one more in March and April. But the point being, it is until the road trip at the end of the month, they are home. What I think is fascinating about this is the Lakers been a good home team. But it is a home-heavy schedule filled with good opponents. Miami on Wednesday. Memphis with Ja back has been significantly better, as you would expect. They look a lot more like the Grizzlies are supposed to. They play the Clippers twice. Toronto, they're well below 500, but we'll see how they look, post-trade. That could, give them a little bit of juice. Phoenix with Bradley Beal today back. They see Oklahoma City. They see Dallas. Brooklyn is not an awful team. Chicago, they just lost to. So it's like they have a lot of challenging games, but they're all at home. And I don't know exactly what.
Well, hopefully by then Zach LaVine will be back. That should help them against the Bulls.
Probably. And you talk about that, like the trade deadline, like this month, in terms of determining what the Lakers do, how aggressive they feel like they need to be, what kinds of deals they feel like they need to make, where the holes are. It's not an easy schedule. It's just a home heavy schedule. And I'm really curious as to how that impacts them. Just the idea of not having to leave town, maybe being able to sneak in a few practices here and there. I want to see what you are expecting, though, from this stretch of games, what your hopes and dreams are. And we'll get to that next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by PrizePicks, the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stats projections and watch the winnings roll in up to 25 times your money. And you can pick combo projections across the NFL and the NBA with the Specials League created specifically for projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, LeBron and Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made and receptions. With the PrizePicks reboot policy, your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured for NFL games, NBA games. If you have a player who exits the game in the first half, doesn't return in the second, like what happened with Rui Hachimura in New Orleans on New Year's Eve. That player, Rui in this case, would be rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use that code LockedOnNBA, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, at prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
The Lakers opened the month, Andy, 17-17, clinging to the 10th spot, the final play-in spot in the Western Conference, a game above the Warriors. We went through some of the particulars of who they're going to play. It ain't easy. It's filled with playoff teams. What do you expect, and what do you think they need from this month, from a record standpoint, from a quality of play standpoint?
Well, you touched on it a little bit earlier. The opportunity, even though they're playing every other day, there's no 2 days off, 3 days off. They have the opportunity to practice more, even if they are lower impact practices, even if they are practices that are less about on the court, more about like a really in-depth film session, things like that. I am really hoping that they take advantage of that, because that is something a lot of guys have talked about in terms of needing to get on the same page with everybody else. Something Anthony Davis talked about, in between, as aggressively as AD typically gets, saying, guys, I need more help defensively. He did mention the communication and just the idea that you can use this time that isn't spent in and out of hotels, packing suitcases, jet lagged, whatever, getting back on the same page, getting back to basics on certain things if you need to. But, the 2 days in between the Pelicans and this game against the Heat, the Lakers will not practice. They've already said that Tuesday will not be a practice today. I'm hoping that is in part because, D'Angelo Russell, we don't know about his availability. Cam Reddish, we don't know about his availability. Rui Hachimura, don't know about his. Maybe it's an issue of not enough guys or just wanting to give everybody
and
an extra game.
LeBron is banged up. Anthony Davis is banged up. They got
Sure.
the rest. The rest, I can buy the argument. And these guys are in the facility. They're going in for treatment. They're watching tape, whatever.
That being said,
I can buy the argument. I'm just saying that I can buy the argument that the rest is more important than the practice time.
Well, to a point, maybe. But I also think, given where they are, 17-17, and some of the things they've talked about, Austin Reeves, after the Pelicans loss, was asked about whether or not the urgency gets raised given a 500 record and what they went through last year, having to scratch their way in just to make the play-in, much less the run they went on, and looking to avoid that. And Reeves said in so many words, I think the urgency should be really high in every game, regardless of our record. Maybe it raises up a little bit more now, but we should be treating all of these games with urgency. I want to win every single time I step on the floor. So that being the case, I get the idea of rest. I get the idea of banged up bodies, but at the same time, man, that's part of the deal in the NBA. And if you are a team that clearly needs some degree of practice because you have fallen off the same page, you may just have to push through that.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, and it depends.
You don't know it to be intense Pat Riley-esque practices.
Correct. That's the thing. It's like, are you in the facility watching film? Are you connecting with teammates? Are you connecting with the coaching staff? I mean, it's interesting. Like, a lot of it is you hear a lot of guys say, like the communication thing with AD after the Pelicans game. we talk about it all the time. We talk about doing X, Y, and Z. In this case, it's communication all the time. And then we don't go do it. So to some degree, there is some, communication of what we want to see, what we're trying to do. And I'm not saying communicate defensively on the court is like some sort of revelatory thing that the coaching staff is asking them to do. I'm just saying that there are things that are clearly said in practice, in film sessions, in walkthroughs before games or whatever, that are not translating onto the floor. And I think one thing that does help, LeBron got mugged a couple times by Jose Alvarado in the Pelicans game, doing the Jose Alvarado sneaky hiding in the corner thing, and he comes in. There's one great clip. The first time it happened, you can see that Taurean Prince sees Alvarado, and he tries actually to screen him, but it doesn't work because Alvarado's a shifty little fella, and he gets around and he turns towards the up court, and and there's the communication may have been there, but he couldn't hear it and then you see LeBron go to, I didn't hear it. I couldn't hear anything. And part of the reason was, I believe that was off of a made three and like all kinds of other stuff. Like the Pelicans had all this, fun stuff going on, and the crowd was really into it. And so it's hard to hear. A home crowd just makes things, a home building just makes things easier. It's a little bit like when we talk about playing, like you have a palate cleanser against the Hornets. Beating the second half that they played against Charlotte doesn't show that everything is fixed. Although, it is fair to say, since the first Minnesota game, they have played better, I think, broadly than they did right after the IST. But sometimes you just need to have good things happen and have the ability to put 2 or 3 or 4 possessions together that work on both sides of the ball, just so you can feel what it looks like again. And playing at home provides some of those opportunities. It's not, I kind of wish there was more of those San Antonio games, or a couple Portlands thrown in there or whatever. They're not getting that, but at least they get the routine of not having to go places, of having an extra hour to talk to a teammate, to review film, to do all that other stuff, because you're not checking into a hotel at 3 a.m. I
would like to see a little more time spent in between games on the court, because I think this team actually needs it.
And hopefully if they can get healthy enough, they might be able to do that more.
I would just also say, if they are being transparent about the amount that they communicate, then clearly it's not simply a matter that can be talked through. It needs to be addressed through physical repetition as well. Mm-hmm. Like, this isn't something that simply everyone can sit down at a table and work out. Like, you actually have to you have to go through the motions.
Right. But and you practice it. I am willing to bet, to the extent that they practice, they probably communicate beautifully in practice.
Sure.
It is taking that and doing it, and this is where the slow starts, the sort of the lack of cohesion in the lineups and all that stuff come into play. To the extent that you are willing to accept fatigue as some sort of influence on the quality of their play. One of the first things that goes is talking. It is true of almost every sport. Communication, when you are tired, when you are frustrated, when things are not going well, communication is always one of the first things that disappears.
Honestly, the first thing that falls apart in basically any setting when things aren't going well, like in your personal life.
Yes.
If things are not going well, you tend to shut down and not speak as much about things that you should.
Right. And it may not be because you're angry at that guy. It's like, you're frustrated. You forget details. You're
exhausted.
You're tired, whatever it might be. And so but that communication is a detail. It's a fundamental necessity. But it's a detail of what you're doing in your head. I got to go, whatever. We're supposed to leave that guy open. We're here. And we're going to remember to talk. And it's through every level of sport. Like, coaches are constantly talking about and harping on communication and talking to each other. But I look at it's 12 games before they go on the road trip, which sort of ends the month of January, the home heavy January. It's not an easy task, but they got to finish that stretch of 12 games, 3 or 4 games over 500. I mean, like when you start to look at the way that February lays out with a few easier teams, but many more games on the road, and then you start getting into March and April, like you're not setting yourself up for anything good if you're still 500 when you head out on the road at the end of the month. They need to be 3 or 4 games, I think, over in that stretch of 12.
Look, if they are the team that they set out to be heading into this season, they thought they were after the roster that they assembled, they should be able to do that when you play basically the entire month of January at home. You should be able to do that. If you can't, they may not be the team that they think that they are or set out to be.
Yeah, and that's actually a question that I think we're going to ask over the course of the next few shows. Lakers 11-4, by the way, for people who haven't been keeping score. 11-4 at home, so have played much, much better in their own building. Is Darvin Ham overthinking his rotations? That is, I think, a gentle way of putting some of the criticism that he is getting both on the Locked On Lakers YouTube channel and across Lakers social media. So we'll talk about that next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel, and the NFL regular season, it is wrapping up. It's been a hell of a run down the stretch, but there is still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 bonus bets, win or lose. So the app, it's just really easy to use. There are a lot of different ways to bet, like live same game parlays. You find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, all sorts of different fun stuff, futures. It's great. It's a lot of fun. And obviously there are NBA options out there for you as well. You've got the Lakers. Could they win a championship? Can they get to the finals? LeBron and AD, their odds for MVP. Anthony Davis, Defensive Player of the Year. Austin Reeves, Sixth Man of the Year. All sorts of fun for across sports. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup.
One of the things, Andy, that we spent last week talking a lot about the lineup. So like, what should Darvin be doing? And I have said, like, I would have liked to see him, once Jared Vanderbilt was available, try that lineup that they used last year, the one that helped get them to the Western Conference Finals. They tinkered with a little bit here and there, but that was the basic lineup they used once the trade deadline was done. Russell, Reeves, LeBron, AD, Vanderbilt. And there's a lot of criticism, and I've kind of nodded along with some of it, not all of it, but some of it, saying like, the Lakers just aren't doing the stuff. They're not doing the things that got them where they were last year. And I think there is some truth to that. But I was also thinking today, can they do some of those things? Like, you can't run, they haven't been able to run the lineup with Jared Vanderbilt, and like they couldn't start the season with it. They couldn't do it for the first, 15 or so, 18 games because Vanderbilt wasn't there. And then when he came back, he wasn't able to play enough and, wasn't sharp enough. He was essentially going through his training camp.
It's only been about a week that Jared Vanderbilt has regularly been playing more than 15 minutes a game.
Right. And because, he keeps hurting himself. He kept hurting himself too. Like, he wasn't completely healthy when he came back. And then, so that's part of it. And then you go back to last year, and so much of both the identity and the playing style and the strategies that they had available to them was wrapped up in Dennis Schroeder. He was, not everything. He wasn't the most important player they had, but he was important for a lot of the stuff they wanted to do. He is obviously gone. The person that was replacing Schroeder hasn't played. So they haven't been able to put that element of the thing that they did last year into practice, because Gabe Vincent can't play the Dennis Schroeder role to whatever degree he would have been able to do it. And so now you're in a situation where I say to myself, well, wait a minute. They can't, as long as Vincent is out with the roster they have, I don't think they can start last year's lineup, because you can't have all three of your ball handlers on the floor at the same time and then try to run a coherent rotation after that. One of those guys, in my mind, probably needs to come off the bench. And I don't say this to absolve Darvin of blame because he doesn't deserve that. He deserves blame. But I'm just saying is like you can't compare this year to last year as an apples to apples thing. It is not. The context of this year to last year isn't exactly the same.
Yeah, I got every indication heading into training camp that it was going to be AD, LeBron, D'Lo, and Reeves, 4 starters, absolutely in ink. I mean, Darvin said during media day that D'Angelo Russell was going to be a starter.
Yes,
he put that to bed, and he had declared Reeves a starter during the summer. Like,
right, it was like June,
right, and
July.
LeBron and AD go without saying. I had gotten every impression that the 5th starter was likely going to be either Vanderbilt or Rui. Like Taurean Prince, who ended up the 5th guy, to me seemed the least likely to end up doing it. It ended up, I think, as much necessity as anything else because, like you said, Vando was not available. Rui, I actually think, makes more sense playing off the bench, all things being equal. If you have a full complement of everyone, I actually think you're going to end up getting the most from Rui if he's not part of the first 5 and he can have a little more direct scoring opportunities. But like you said, things did not get off to the start that they anticipated in terms of availability. Taurean Prince has emerged the best shooter that they have. He's the closest thing they have to a volume shooter on this team. There are other flaws in his game, whether you're talking about certain defensive matchups or, at his decision making can run the gamut from brilliant to what the F, man. Like
when he is asked to do not asked or decides to do things that, put the ball on the floor, play point guard or stuff like that, the results he can crash the glass and he can drive a little bit.
It runs the gamut. There are times where you're like, oh my Taurean, and then there's times like, oh my Taurean.
Oh my.
Yeah, I mean, like it goes all over the place. But
but broadly speaking, maybe I realize he is a bit of a villain in social circles. I think it's a lot of his frustration with Darvin channeled through Taurean Prince. Overall, I think Taurean Prince played pretty well.
The reason I bring up this stuff with Taurean isn't to even debate the merits of his play as much as just say, I understand why he's emerged a fixture in the starting lineup, because from a functional standpoint, it has made sense because, again, he has been after a brutal start, he has been their best shooter.
Right.
And he's
one of the few guys that you can play who has some defensive versatility. He's not a lockdown defender, but he's got some defensive versatility, works hard on that end that you can play that provides a little bit of offense and defense as opposed to like Reddish and Vanderbilt.
I think
he are clearly one or the other.
I think he should play fewer minutes. And I think Darvin has had more of an opportunity to reduce Taurean's minutes to closer to his career level stats that I think, frankly, would be better for everyone, including Taurean.
I agree.
But I have zero issues with Taurean ending up in the starting lineup, which was not something you or I expected at all heading into the season. And
not
frankly,
initially, it started to become kind of clear that it could be a possibility, as training camp rolled on and stuff like that.
But that was in part because Vanderbilt was hurt. He got hurt.
And Prince was shooting like 96% in training camp.
But as far as like the idea of overthinking things, we've talked about this before. Over the last couple weeks, it has felt increasingly like the players, it's not a question of not understanding their roles, but more, we don't understand how you are implementing us in our roles, how you are going to use us on a game-to-game basis in a role that I may understand, but I don't understand what you're going to do with me. Like, we've talked about before, like Rui has been kind of the poster boy for this, where his minutes will fluctuate all over the place in ways that don't really seem dependent on how he's played. There was a recent game where, D'Angelo Russell struggled for the majority. It was the road game against the Wolves, the first one. he struggled for the overwhelming majority of the game until the fourth quarter. He started playing well down the stretch, but he got like 9 or 10 more minutes than Austin Reeves, who actually had been playing well in that game. And that's when Darvin first revealed that idea of Reeves being ideal at around 28 minutes, which is strange for a guy that you propped up as a starter.
Right. And we debated a little bit after that game. I remember we debated a little bit about the functioning, as bad as D'Lo was looking, sort of the functioning of the offense with Reeves running it versus D'Lo. But your broad point, I understand what you're getting at.
It doesn't have to be, though, one or the other. It can at times be both, or in a specific game where Reeves is out playing D'Lo, it does seem strange to give the majority of those minutes to D'Angelo. So it just, things like that, and then like the new lineup, which we've talked about before. I understand a lot of the logic of it, and there, as much as it can make the offense on paper and in practice ugly, the defense has been a bigger problem for this team. But there's the question of, is Darvin going about this in a way that creates no balance whatsoever? Because the second unit becomes like all offense, no defense.
Right. And it's worth noting that Darvin Rui got hurt, but the lineup change that they made on New Year's Eve, Darvin said before the game, like, we're going to roll with this. Like, he had apparently ditched the lineup that nobody liked going into that game. The plan was to ditch that going forward, which I thought was great, but then Rui got hurt, and so it's like, what I'm if Rui can't play, and it should be noted, Dan Wojcicki, among others, did say, Hachimura walked out of the arena. There was obviously concern based on what Darvin said after the game, but it may not be quite as bad as we're very, 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 very concerned that it seemed like after the game. So maybe Rui can get back and they can at least start that group going forward a little bit. But there's something we don't have time to do it today, and maybe we can do it for tomorrow. I'm really interested in the stuff that wasn't working, or that isn't working as well this year, that was working better last year. The 3-man pairing of Hachimura, Davis, and LeBron was a +9 in terms of net rating last year. It is I think almost -3 this year. Relatively limited minutes, but the results have been really bad. Or at least not good, not as good as they were last year. The Russell Reeves pairing last year was very strong, well above water in its net rating. It's been well below water this year in the net rating. Like, what are the things? Is it related just to the presence of Jared Vanderbilt at the beginning of the season? Is it just related to the statistical weirdness of Austin Reeves' opening? All of this stuff. It's like, that to me is the crux of trying to figure out last year to this year, what can we apply right now with the context of the players that we have who are playing how they are in the physical condition that they're in, and try to recreate what worked for us, while also not being so wedded to it that we don't adjust to the fact that last year was last year and this year is this year.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Also, too, before we go, just heading into tomorrow's show, I know there's been a few times you've brought up the idea of swapping in Max Christie for Cam Reddish's role as more of an offensive upgrade and more of a balance. We'll talk about it tomorrow. I've got some numbers comparing Reddish and Christie that I think you will find very, very interesting.
Ooh, good tease. Do I have to wait until tomorrow?
Yes, you do.
Damn it. All right, well, Locked On Lakers, let's get there fast then. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to hang out with over 22,000 subscribers, leave questions, and enjoy cliffhangers like the one that you just heard from Andy about Max Christie versus Cam Reddish. We will be back. We got a lot of questions to answer. We really want to hear your thoughts. Even if we don't read them, we go like literally your comment. We go through all of them just to get like the vibes from everyone, and that informs a lot of what we're doing. But we love to include your comments on the show, so we do read this stuff every single day and try to respond as much as we can. We will see everyone tomorrow.